Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We are going to give it just a minute or two to make sure everyone has a chance to join before we get started. So if you're joining us now, if you want to go ahead and let us know where you are Zooming in from, we'd love to see that in the chat. All right, it looks like we've got folks from all across Virginia, in Henrico County, Carroll County, here in Blacksburg. See a couple of friends on here tonight. Good to see you all. So we can go ahead and get started, I think. Welcome to our General Assembly crossover webinar. This is where we give our update about what's going on at the midpoint of the General Assembly session. And so if you're not familiar with the term crossover, I'll just take a moment to explain that. Oh, and I didn't introduce myself, so maybe I'll pause and do that real quick. My name is Emily Piantek. I'm the Energy Democracy Field Coordinator for Appalachian Voices, and I am based here in Blacksburg. And I have several teammates who are on this webinar with us tonight, and I think we'll all just introduce ourselves as we come off mute to give our little overview of what's going on at the GA. So you'll get to meet all of us one by one. But yeah, so this is our crossover webinar. What we mean by crossover is just that point in the General Assembly session when legislation that was successful in either body, so past the Senate or past the House, then crosses over to the other chamber for consideration by that body. So any bill that hasn't been successful in the House or the Senate at this point is now effectively dead for the rest of the General Assembly session. So that can be good news for bills that we're trying to fight, and bad news for bills that we have been supporting and trying to succeed with during this General Assembly session. And another important thing about crossover is that these bills will go through the same process that they went through in the House. So they will be in the House or Senate. So after they cross over, they will be referred to a committee. Usually this is the same committee that heard them before crossover. They'll have that referral to a committee, and then that committee will hold a hearing and vote or make a recommendation about the piece of legislation, and then it will move on to the full Senate or the full House, depending on how that committee meeting went for a vote there. If any changes are made to legislation by either body, then those bills will have to go to a conference committee where members of the House and members of the Senate will come together and discuss those amendments and agree on something to move forward with. The thing about conference committee that's important to note is that there's not really much transparency about that committee. So it's really important if you know who's going to be in conference committee on a bill you care about to reach out to them, but there isn't the same public process for legislation that there is prior to that point. So this whole process of being referred to another committee in the opposite chamber and then having that hearing and a vote there, and then the vote on the full House or Senate floor has just 2 weeks to happen because the 2023 legislative session ends on February 25th. So that's coming up. So this is a big push for us on some of the legislation that we'll talk to you about tonight. And then just a final note before I move on, any bills that do succeed, they have the approval of the House and the approval of the Senate, still need the governor's signature before they can become law. So that's our final hurdle that we face. Yeah, so that's just a good overview of crossover. Jess, can you move to the next slide, please? Great. So I just wanted to say thanks because I know a lot of y'all have been playing a really critical role for us during this General Assembly session. Your advocacy is super important, and what you see on this slide here are pictures of people in Richmond doing the hard work of meeting with legislators and talking to them about their issues and their priorities during the session. And we've just been really blown away and grateful for all of the support that we've received so far. And just for a little fun, I'm going to launch a poll here with a couple of questions to find out what you all have been doing to support legislation during this General Assembly session. And I'm going to launch that now. I'll give folks about a minute to answer those questions. All right, this is great. So far, I'm seeing some of the results, and it looks like most people on this webinar have taken one of our actions during this General Assembly session, so thank you for that. Several of you participated in one of our lobby days, which is awesome, or maybe another lobby day that another organization was hosting. Y'all have sent emails to your delegates and senators and spoken with them about your issues. That's awesome, and we definitely appreciate your advocacy. It is so important for legislators to hear from their constituents. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And yeah, talk a little bit about what some of that advocacy looks like. So some of you mentioned that you have participated in a lobby day. So if you weren't able to do that this session, basically a lobby day is just when groups like like Appalachian Voices or other advocates organize meetings with delegates and senators and their constituents, and folks will come into Richmond and be able to have those meetings in person with their representative or their staff. It also involves sending emails to your legislator, taking one of our actions, speaking with them or their staff about your issues, and then even testifying at committee hearings, or submitting comments, because you can do that online too for some of the committees. And then finally, we haven't quite gotten to this point yet because we're still in the thick of the session, but it's really important to also kind of wrap up that advocacy by thanking your legislator when they do take the stance that you wanted to see on any of your positions. So I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Emma, who's going to talk in a little bit more detail about one of the lobby days that she helped organize.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So I'm Emma. I'm the New Economy Field Coordinator with Appalachian Voices, working out of the Coalfield region in Southwest Virginia. And we had a shared solar lobby day for SB 1083, which is trying to get shared solar expanded to Appalachian Power Company territory. And we actually had 6 Southwest Virginians travel up to Richmond on the 23rd and the 24th. Got a bright and early start on that Tuesday. Everybody was at the Pocahontas building at 6:30 in the morning, and then spent a good portion of that day going around and talking to the legislators on the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee. We had a wonderful meeting with Senator Spruill, who was the lead for the Energy Subcommittee, so the first committee that the bill went through. And it was very fun, productive, and informative, and very influential, because SB 1083 did end up making it through the Senate and is now going on its journey, hopefully all the way through the House. And Dustin from Russell County was kind enough to let us film him on this little video that we're about to show you.
We're here today supporting the New Economy Network and also advocating for shared solar, trying to get our folks in Southwest Virginia access to utilize shared solar in the Appalachian Power Service region. Shared solar is important because we need more people to buy in and have the freedom to access solar energy. If they're in a shared setting, whether it be residential or commercial, being able to tap into the freedom and the flexibility that solar allows us to have. We're proud to come up and advocate on behalf of the Appalachian people in Southwest Virginia. We're here today supporting the new.
All right, thank you, Emma, for that overview of shared solar. That was an awesome day. And thanks to some of that hard work, SB 1083 is crossing over. So before we get into other policy priorities, including some of our other solar advocacy, I just wanted to make a final note that even though we've reached this point in the General Assembly, it's not over. Your advocacy is still as important as ever and is still needed. So in addition to looking out for our action alerts and taking action when you can also meet or speak with your legislator directly, continue sending them your own emails about your issues. And I have a link up here which we can share later about how to find their contact information if you don't already have it. And just a quick reminder that whenever you are doing outreach about a piece of legislation, it's incredibly important to include the bill number, let them know whether you support or oppose it, and then also whether you are a constituent or that you live in their district, because these are the people that they are most responsive to because they're responsible to represent your interests. So definitely let them know if you're one of their constituents. And then I mentioned this already, but there might still be opportunities for you to submit written comments or speak to a committee during one of the hearings that's going to happen after the bills cross over. So with that, I think I will turn things over to our legislative director, Peter Anderson.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for that intro. I'm Peter Anderson. I'm our Virginia Policy Director. I'm normally based in Charlottesville, Virginia, but I live in Richmond during the General Assembly session. So that's where I'm joining you from this evening. I will do my best here this evening, but I can tell you up front, I'm not going to be nearly as charming as Dustin from Southwest Virginia just was on that video. So I'll try to be just as informative, even if I don't pull it off as well as he did. So this is kind of this slide, if you're able to view it, if you're not on your phones right now, is kind of just a broad overview of some of the policies that we are advocating for and against, and watching very closely because they're priorities for clean energy advocates and for the Appalachian region. And so we can, this is kind of an overview of the slides that are going to follow this one. And you'll see that we've been advocating for bills that make your electricity bill more affordable. You saw the shared solar piece that Dustin just shared. Emily's going to talk to you a little bit about shutoff policy for essential utilities like power, electric, and water, and give you an update there. There's also a cool update on trying to get some of those federal Inflation Reduction Act dollars down here to Virginia to support our clean energy transition, and other items that Robert will tell you about in the budget. And those are kind of like some of our main positive priorities. So this is a sampling, not all of them. And there's also some bills that we are opposing, listed under the bad section here, including a major piece of legislation that is supported by Dominion Energy, which is the largest electric utility in the state. And they have a bill that would raise their profit margin and increase your electricity bill if you're a Dominion customer, which is, I think 2.6 million of the 8 million Virginians have Dominion Energy as their power provider. So they're big. Other attacks on clean energy policies that have been passed over the last few years, including bills that have been introduced that would either undercut or completely eliminate elements of the Virginia Clean Economy Act and Virginia's participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And then we're also fighting against a bill again this year that we fought against last year that would really harm Virginia's transition to electric service and keep us connected to gas in perpetuity. So fighting that one as well. Jess, how about the next slide? So I'm going to drill down into some detail on some of the victories that we've had protecting our participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And so this slide, we've got 3 bills that would have undermined or repealed those policies entirely. And we're pleased to report that it's the end of the line for some of these bills. So the first one up was the full, as we call the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, the acronym. So this was the full RGGI repeal that was filed by Senator Stewart. And it was defeated in the Senate in the first half of this General Assembly session. It does not have a House companion, so we're all set there. The legal participation in RGGI stands in Virginia and was not repealed. So great news there. The second bill we have on the list here was kind of a wonky bill, but it basically would have carved out exemptions for industrial power customers so that they don't have to pay for part of the clean energy transition under the VCEA. And that bill did not make it out of the House. It does not have a Senate companion, so that's also dead for the year. And then the third bill on here was another one of the bills that would undercut the Clean Economy Act. It would have basically allowed our electric utilities to either slow or avoid entirely the renewable energy portfolio standard that was enacted in the VCEA. This bill was amended. It did fail. It does have a House companion, which has been amended and is still alive. So that's we are still tracking the House companion to this Senate Bill 1125 and fighting that as it crosses over to the Senate. Great, thank you for the next slide. So on this slide, I'm talking mostly about electricity being affordable or not affordable. And so there's several bills, some good ones that we support. The Affordable Energy Act, first and foremost. We have the bill numbers there on the slide, Senate and House companion bills. And the great news on the Affordable Energy Act is that we've had a broad coalition of environmental and low-income advocates and business advocates, people advocating for affordability for small businesses, have all come together and supported the Affordable Energy Act. The core of this policy is it allows the State Corporation Commission, which is our monopoly electric utility regulator, to have more authority to lower our bills when the companies like Appalachian Power and Dominion have overcharged us. Then the SCC will be able to lower our bills going forward. So we're really excited to see the Affordable Energy Act moving forward out of both chambers at crossover, and hope they make it across the finish line into the governor's desk. Here's another wonky bill, the RAC Reform Act, listed on the slide, House Bill 2267. This was just simply put another bill that would increase the regulator's authority over those regulated utilities that I just mentioned, and enable the commission to keep our electric rates as low as possible. So this one did have a Senate companion that unfortunately failed in the first half of session, but the House bill passed the House, I'm pretty sure unanimously, if memory serves correctly. So that one will go over to the Senate, and when the Senate will get a second chance at this good policy, and we'll be advocating in favor of that. And then third, you see the red X here. This is the Dominion bill that I referred to before. This is essentially legislating something that should be done by the expert regulators. And this is, Dominion is asking the legislators to increase its profit margin with a piece of legislation, which will raise our bills. And so we continue to oppose that bill. It's interesting that the Senate and House companion bills are very different now. The House bill received a major, a substitute is what they call it, on the House side just before crossover. And so they're very different right now, and negotiations are ongoing between sort of the House and the Senate and the governor. And so TBD, but we're still keeping an eye on that and advocating for all of the negative parts that would increase our bills to not go forward. So we continue to ask for your support in opposing those bills. And I think on the next slide, there's just one little piece for me to talk about before I hand it over. So if you bring your eyes to the far bottom right-hand corner, I'm talking about the Commonwealth Solar and Economic Development Fund on the bottom right corner, Senate Bill 1333. I'm just going to talk about this because I've been working on this one. This is a Senate bill with the patron is Senator Ghazala Hashmi. And this bill essentially is aimed at bringing all the new federal money since the IRA passed Congress last year. This bill is aimed at bringing all those dollars, not all of them, but a significant chunk of those billions of dollars that are available for clean energy right now, bringing them here to Virginia. And we already have a program that is aimed at helping residential folks who are low to moderate income install solar energy efficiency measures and battery storage on their properties. And so this bill would allow them to access those federal dollars for that really key program. And with that, I will pass the mic over to my colleague, Robert.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening, everyone. Robert Kell, the New Economy Program Manager based with Emma in our Norton office down in the coal field. So I have basically nothing but good news to share tonight. We'll start with SB 1266, which was carried by Senator SWVA. Folks have heard us talk about the shared solar program, which was created a few years ago. And what 1266 does is fix the minimum bill charge that customers who are subscribers to a shared solar system will pay. So it's, after they get all of their benefits of having solar on through the subscription, there's this basic charge that they still need to pay the utility for the power lines and all of the things that aren't a part of the array itself. And so Dominion had set, the SEC had set this bill at $55, which is really quite high for a minimum bill when you think about all of the benefits that having this shared solar added to the grid provides. So this bill allows the SEC now to consider things like the impacts, positive impacts that shared solar has on transmission, having a more distributive system, the environmental positive impacts of having solar on online, and then the impacts that shared solar has on lowering the fuel factor costs for all customers. So this is a huge win to help make that program more affordable and accessible. And it also, this bill expands the program. It goes from being a 150 megawatt program to now 700 megawatt program. So it's going to be, it's bigger and better. And the program even has the ability to grow out more as more low income customers come on. So big win there. But an even bigger win is seeing the program finally, hopefully expanded to Appalachian Power customers. So SB 1083, also carried by Senator SWVA and Senator Edwards, basically takes the Dominion program and expands it to the APCO territory. Unfortunately, some folks down in Southwest Virginia actually are part of the old Dominion Power utility territory. And unfortunately, they were cut out this time, but we're going to continue to go and fight and see the program expanded. So this bill has the same minimum bill considerations that Dominion bill I just said has. So we'll start off hopefully in a better posture with the minimum bill as the SEC considers the positive impact shared solar will also have on APCO's grid. And it sets 150 megawatt cap for the program. But as we've seen in the Dominion territory, there's room to eventually see that grow. And I think the other difference with this bill is that it has a different low income definition. And the definition in this bill is 80% of the median income of a locality, which for a place like Weiss County, where the median income is something like 40,000, that means a family, an individual or a household will have to make under 33,000 or so to be able to qualify as low income. And then the bill also does have incentives for placing shared solar on brownfields. So I'll move from those victories. They've crossed over. They have to make it through the House and then to the governor's desk before they become law. But they're both going with a lot of momentum. The governor has signaled that he would sign both of those bills if they make it to his desk. And the APCO shared solar bill came out of the Senate with a tremendous amount of bipartisan support. So every senator but 5 Republicans voted for it. So that's pretty impressive. Bright Fields Fund, we've talked a lot about this. I think it was in 2021, Delegate Kilgore created this fund to help incentivize putting solar on brownfield sites, which are like environmentally contaminated sites or old coal mine land. And no funding ever went into that, that program because it required the federal government to put funds in first. And unfortunately, those funds never came. So Delegate Kilgore put up a $10 million request, but ultimately, right now, as it stands, there's $5 million for that program in the House budget. So we're going to fight during the budget process to see at least 5 million, but we would like to see it grow to at least to 10 or as much as we can get. But we're excited to see the program have at least some funding. And then last, we talked a lot about the Virginia Power Innovation Fund, which was an initiative of Governor Youngkin to be able to start a nuclear innovation hub, and also had some other technologies listed as innovative energies. And the governor wanted to be able to infuse both this nuclear hub and a program with $10 million to see those technologies be researched and developed in the state. There's been a lot of changes with the Senate side of this conversation. Essentially, the Senate has really narrowed the language and is trying to create what is a basic Virginia Power Innovation Fund that is more flexible towards a variety of technologies and doesn't have language for nuclear. And the Senate side, this has 2 million. I think I've seen 8 million as well. And the House side has 10 million for that program, but has all of the same language. So this is something we've been really watching carefully, because we know that energy projects do need state funding to be able to be competitive to go after federal funding. But how that state funding gets set up and infused in these programs is really important. Just making sure wherever energy projects go in the state, communities are at the table, and that any competitive projects going to the feds have the best chance of getting deployed in Virginia. So I think I'm done, and I'll pass it to the next person. I think Jess.
Thanks, Robert. Yes, that's me. So I'm going to talk about a bill that came out of the House this session. That's an issue that's both old and new. We have a legacy and history of metals mining in the state, including gold, copper, zinc, and lead. And coming out of concerns about the potentiality of large-scale gold mining within the state, the General Assembly requested a study to look at the potential negative impacts if that industry were to come here. So the results of that study were in at the beginning of last year, and House Bill 1722 from Delegate Simons was a response to a specific concern within those studies, and that is the potential threat from cyanide to our water resources. Cyanide, as you may be personally familiar with, is a very toxic and dangerous substance, and it can be used in some mineral mining operations. So with gold, it is not the only way to process it, but it's one way. And so Delegate Simons' bill would have prohibited the use of cyanide and cyanide compounds in metals mining and mineral mining processes. We did find a good amount of support when it came to its House subcommittee. It passed out unanimously, and along the way it gained, I think, 4 or 5 Democrat co-patrons and a Republican co-patron also, Delegate Edmonds, who has been engaged on this issue in years past. So really just to flag, because the end of this story is not good. Cyanide remains dangerous, remains a concern, and that is specifically because if you have a spill, you can have very dire consequences from that. And so in the mining process, the ore is pulled up from the ground, sprayed with a cyanide solution, and that solution pulls the gold from the rest of the ore. And so you have that toxic process happening then, and then you have waste materials that you have to store. So this is a concern that will continue, is the potentiality of this industry coming to Virginia, where we know there's already exploratory drilling for gold mining in Buckingham County, exploratory drilling for zinc and lead in Campbell and Pittsylvania counties. So want to make a note, just like gold, zinc and lead do not have to use cyanide in their processing. That is one way in which they can be processed, but it is not the only way. So that's an important distinction. We, in working in this bill, wanted to support Delegate Simon's deep concerns about the toxicity of cyanide specifically. So passed out of subcommittee unanimously. Great news, new patrons, got to its full House Agriculture Committee and had a vote of 19-3. And unfortunately, it was re-referred to the House Agriculture Committee after it had already received its first reading, which is more of a procedural thing, not a space for debate. But we found that it did not get an opportunity for a debate and a second reading, unfortunately. So we're deeply appreciative to Delegate Simons, to Delegate Edmonds, and all the other co-patrons. And this is an issue we will continue to very robustly work on. And hopefully with the continued work from Delegate Simons, Delegate Edmonds on protecting Virginia's water resources from a potential toxic threat like cyanide. And I will, with that, turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Jess. And it's me again. So I'm going to wrap up talking about the policy priorities that we've been working on this session with some discussion of our utility shutoff work. So what you see here on the left is a map of states that do or don't have shutoff policies. So what a shutoff policy is when a customer may not be able to afford their bill, and so they face being disconnected from their water, from their gas, or from their electric utilities because they haven't been able to afford their bill. But many states, 43, impose some kinds of limitation on when a utility can shut a customer off over an unpaid bill. And so the states in blue and green have some type of shutoff policy in place, whether that's when it's very hot out or when it's very cold out, and sometimes when it's both hot and cold. For example, they say a utility can't shut someone off. And other states have limitations on shutoff for Fridays or holidays or things like that, just so that folks aren't losing power during these high-risk conditions, or when the utility isn't able to quickly connect their services again once they've resolved their bill issues. So Virginia is one of 7 states that doesn't have any kind of shutoff policy in place. And so we've been working to try to establish that at the state level for a couple of years now. And last General Assembly session, we were successful in getting the State Corporation Commission, so our utility regulators, to review existing informal shutoff policies that our utilities in Virginia have, and then to make some recommendations on what would be needed at the state level. And so Senate Bill 1447, which was introduced by Senator Edwards, does exactly that. It draws directly from the recommendations of the State Corporation Commission to initiate a process by which those same regulators would then create a formal policy within certain parameters. So again, those kind of hot and cold weather periods, 32 degrees and 95 degrees Fahrenheit are kind of the typical cutoff limitation thresholds that you would see. And then it also would stop shutoffs on Fridays and state holidays, again, just to make sure that people are not getting cut off on a non-business day of the utility or right before a non-business day, so that they're not left hanging when they're trying to get their water and power, which are essential utilities, restored. And so this bill passed the Senate in a bipartisan vote of 24-15. So we picked up a few Republicans on the way, which was super exciting. And now it crosses over to the House for another chance. Unfortunately, it does face a tough road in the House. We did have a House companion to this bill, which did the exact same thing as Senator Edwards' bill does, but that was tabled by the Commerce and Energy Subcommittee on a party line vote. So we're hoping to, to try again, and we're having a lot of conversations with legislators, and I know a lot of members of the public are doing that as well, which is great, just to show that constituents care about this and that these are important policies that Virginia needs. And then just on another bit of good news to close this slide on, we've also been following some budget items, which would expand the application period for LIHEAP, or the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, in the House and Senate. And so the LIHEAP program currently has, I think it's just a 3-week application period in October when folks can apply for assistance in the winter. So they kind of have to already be thinking about if they're going to need utility assistance, and then be really proactive about getting the application in over a very short period of time. So what this budget item does is basically says a needy household can apply during any month of the year at any time to access this state and federal assistance, so that they can pay their heating bills in the winter. So we're really happy to see both of those items included in the official House and Senate budgets, and are hopeful that they'll continue to move forward. So that's it on shutoffs. And Jess, if you can move us to our last slide. Thank you. So basically, I just wanted to sum up a little bit of what we'll be coming back for next year. I've heard from us a little bit on some bills that didn't make it through. And so in addition to kind of our regular work of trying to defend our key climate and environmental policies and supporting an equitable transition to clean energy, we're going to be continuing to protect our communities and our water resources from the impacts of industries like gold mining, as well as working on establishing shutoff protections during a public health crisis. I forgot to mention this, but this is something that was stripped from the bill of Senator Edwards and Delegate Shin, and then also to try to advocate for the same shutoff protections for people who have serious medical conditions. So that's just a little bit of a look ahead, and just want to say thanks again for your continued advocacy. And at this point, I think we can open the floor up to questions. I don't think y'all will be able to come off mute, but if you want to take a moment to type any questions into the chat, we can try to address them. So I'll give you all just a moment to do that.
So we've got a question in the chat. I'm shocked and disturbed that they would allow the use of cyanide when there's other options. How is cyanide waste currently being stored? So one of the things that we wanted to make sure was something we looked at in HB 1722 is that prohibiting cyanide would not impact or impede or stop any current mining regulations here in Virginia. And that's one of the reasons sulfuric acid was removed as a mention in the bill, because we didn't want to impact kyanite. So the good news is that cyanide is not currently being used or currently being stored for mineral mining operations, and we want to keep it that way. And to mention too, this is an issue that impacts potentially so much of Virginia, because the belt, the gold pyrite belt, is from Northern Virginia down to the North Carolina border. So lots of counties should be thinking about if and how and what the impacts could be of this potential industry coming to their neighborhood, or zinc or lead mining also. But thanks for the question. I'd like to throw a question out there for y'all. What are your recommendations when session ends in terms of engaging our legislators and elected officials? What could or should that look like if we're concerned about issues in between sessions?
Somebody else can go, but I'm happy to stay. So I think Emily talked about this, just to refresh everyone's memory. When session is over, sending a thank you note to the legislators that if you've engaged with a legislator on an issue and they were responsive, thanking them for talking to you, or thanking them for voting the way you asked them to. If they did that, that's always a good thing to do. As session ends, which we've only got 17 days left, so 2.5 weeks. And then another thing to do is to keep in mind I think people need a little bit of a break because this is such a intense period of legislation. But I think soon thereafter, if there's an issue that has ongoing work that Emily just previewed for everyone, some of the work that we know is going to have to continue to next year, is to not wait until next January to engage these folks again. It's they should hear from you, especially if they represent you. You're living in their district. They should hear from you, in April, and then maybe again in July, and then everyone's on vacation in July. That was a bad example, but you know what I mean. Like, stay in touch throughout the year so that they know that you haven't forgotten, and don't let them forget about the important issue.
Yeah, I'll just share as well. I know I work with several folks who, volunteer in their communities or Appalachian Voices members and engage on our issues, who meet with their legislators for coffee once or twice a year, usually a couple months before session and then a couple months after session or a couple weeks after session ends. And they've been doing this for a long time. And those representatives may not always agree with them on their issues or, vote the way that the folks that I'm working with want them to, but they are responsive to them. And they have those important conversations and are able to, debate a little bit about certain policy positions. And, recently with the Senator Edwards bill to establish shutoff limitations, one of the senators that ended up voting yes on the House floor had a conversation with one of these constituents a couple days before that bill passed, or before he voted for that bill. And so we were really excited to see that. And I think a part of the reason he had the conversation with this person, with his constituent, is because she's been really good about keeping in touch with him throughout the year for a long time now. So that was really exciting to see. And then there was a question in the chat that I can address real quick about Reggie. So the question is, there is currently a public comment period on the web regarding Reggie. Is that now moot? So that's a great question, and it is not. So basically, the primary attack on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative at the General Assembly session has been defeated, but the governor and his administration are still trying to repeal the regulation that requires Virginia to participate in Reggie. And so the Department of Environmental Quality is overseeing the governor's attempted repeal, and they have opened a public comment period that runs until the end of March. And so it's definitely still important for folks to submit comments to let the DEQ and the Youngkin administration know that we care about Reggie. So we've kind of, we've stopped the efforts to withdraw Virginia on the one hand, but we still have this other effort outside of the legislative process that's going on to try to make that withdrawal. So I'm going to put that link in the chat now, so you can find more information about submitting a comment in support of Reggie. All right, well, do we have any additional questions? Not seeing any in the chat. Well, I just want to say thanks so much to all of you for joining us this evening. It was really exciting to see from our polling that folks have been engaged and involved throughout the session. We really appreciate that. We couldn't do it without you. So thanks for making your voices heard and for the support. We love to see it. So with that, I guess good night and thanks for joining us.